Hi everyone. In this video I want to take a close look at a famous checkmating pattern called Légal's mate. Légal was a French chess player in the 1700s and he's the first person to discover this checkmating pattern and publish it. However, the trap is sometimes called Blackburne's Trap, and it's named after Joseph Henry Blackburne, who dominated British chess in the late 19th century. And one author writes that Blackburne actually sprung this checkmating trap literally hundreds of times on unsuspecting opponents during his annual chess tours. By the way, Blackburne is nicknamed the Black Death, and Blackburne is my name, so I think I'm going to go by that nickname from now on. All right, so let's look at this checkmate in its purest form. So here's a fictional game. So it's a Philidor defense. And here black pins the knight on f3. Okay, white plays h3, and black plays bishop h5. So the knight on f3 is in what we call a relative pin. It's not an absolute pin because it can legally move, but there's a queen behind it. Nevertheless, white is going to move that knight anyway, right now. Okay, can you find the best move for white? All right, the best move is knight takes e5. Okay, and if black takes the queen, then he's fallen for the trap, and white has a mate in 2 in the position. Do you see it? Okay, it's a beautiful checkmate with the minor pieces. Bishop takes f7 check, forces the king to its only legal square, and then the other knight checkmates. And by the way, this is an example of what is called a pure checkmate, which means all the flight squares of the king are covered exactly one time. So it's a beautiful minor piece checkmate. But let's have a closer look at this game. For example, in this position, why did white play h3? Can't he just take on e5 right away, giving up the queen, and then do the same mate? Yeah, that would work, except black doesn't have to take the queen. Okay, instead, what black would do here is take the knight and protect the bishop. So white can't gain the piece back, and white's simply down a piece for a pawn, and black is winning the game. Now, if you play h3 first and kick the bishop back, and then take on e5, then knight takes e5 does not protect the bishop. All right, well, what should white do here? He should regain his piece. But then isn't there another piece hanging over here? What does white do about that? What's white's next move? Okay, hopefully you see queen to b5 check, forking the king and the knight. Black can block, white can get the piece back. So if black doesn't take the queen, the best black can do really is go down a pawn. So white has a healthy pawn advantage, better development, better center. So white has a strong advantage in the position. Okay, this particular checkmating pattern can show up in different ways in different openings. So it's good to be aware of it, and let's take a look at it in another setting. So here I want to look at an example that occurs in a Scotch game. So Scotch game is this move d4 here, and black should take the pawn. And white can try a gambit called the Göring Gambit, and if black accepts it and white recaptures, then white argues he's going to get more space, more open lines for his pieces, and better development for the sacrificed pawn. Okay, black plays d6, bishop c4, black pins the knight, okay, castles, and now black tries to pile up more pressure on the pinned knight, hoping for a retreat bishop to e2, since the bishop is also under attack. Okay, however, white shocks black right here, and do you know what move he plays? Yep, he gets the knight on e5, leaving his queen on prise. And if black takes the queen, Then there's that two-move checkmate with the minor pieces. Bishop takes f7 check, king comes up, and then the knight mates, just like in that fictitious game. Okay, let's look at it in another setting where black actually delivers the checkmate on white. And this will be a variation. And the variation I want to look at occurs in Petrov's defense, which occurs right here. White should take the pawn. And now there's an interesting gambit called the Stafford Gambit, knight to c6. So black is gambiting a pawn here. The engine, by the way, thinks this is a dubious gambit, but it's full of danger for white. White needs to know what they're doing to try to refute the gambit. By the way, if you want to know more about this gambit, look up Eric Rosen on YouTube. He's probably the foremost expert on this opening. He plays it a lot. He catches a lot of strong players in a lot of traps. So Eric Rosen. In fact, I was watching him play a bullet game against none other than world champion Magnus Carlsen recently, and Eric Rosen tried this Stafford Gambit, and what Carlsen did was he just retreated his knight back to f3, not accepting the gambit. So maybe giving a little respect to Eric Rosen. Eric Rosen is a strong international master, and after this game that Carlsen ended up winning, he lamented that he blew his lifetime score against Carlsen because he had played one other game in his lifetime against Carlsen, which was another offhand or tournament bullet game online in which he beat Carlsen. And so now they're tied 1-1. All right, anyway, if white accepts the gambit, which you can do, black will take back with the d-pawn, opening lines for his bishops. d3 is a very common move there. Bishop c5, pointing at that weak f2 square. Black's position has got some venom in it. White should not play this move, bishop to g5. It simply loses. Pinning the knight, putting it in a relative pin. Okay, can you find black's best move in this position? All right, already black springs the trap with knight takes e4, offering the queen. If white takes it, then there's a mate in 2, but a little different than the original Légal's mate. Bishop takes f2 check, forces the king up, and another bishop delivers the mate instead of another knight. So you can't take the queen, but you're in a lot of trouble anyway, even if you don't take it. There's a threat here on f2 by the two minor pieces. So for example, if white tries to come back here and block, well, black can take the bishop off the board and then play queen to h4 check. And then white has to block, but black takes that pawn with a familiar tactic. This pawn is pinned. And black's just winning. Okay, and we'll look at one final game. And this was played by Nigel Short versus Kupreichik in a 1981-82 Hastings tournament. And this doesn't feature a Légal's mate, but it does show you that we can learn something from these checkmating patterns and apply the lessons learned. Okay, so it was a double king's pawn opening. They played a Ruy Lopez, and then the unusual knight to d4. It's called Bird's variation. And the bishop on b5 is hit, so Short retreats it to a4, bishop c5. Okay, black's starting to pile up some pressure here. Knight bd2 supports the other knight on f3. b5 attacks the bishop. Bishop has to fall back, and black can grab the bishop pair here by taking on b3. But he plays d6, opening the diagonal. Okay, white takes the knight in the center. Bishop takes back. Knight f3, hitting that dark squared bishop. Bishop to g4, pinning that knight, but putting it in a relative pin, not an absolute pin. Okay, c3, excellent move, starting to expand the center here. Bishop falls back. a4, opening up the a file for the rook. Okay, white's position is looking really good. B takes a4, bishop takes a4, check. There's no real satisfactory way to meet the check. You can't block with the pawn because bishop takes c6 would fork the king and the rook. You can block with the bishop, but white can take the bishop and draw the king toward the center, or you can move the king. And black chose to move the king, and the engine agrees. King to f8 is actually the best move in the position. Okay, bishop to e3 was played, knight e7, and now white plays a shocking move. What move did white play here? You guessed it, knight takes e5, the theme of the video. That's weird though. There aren't any other pieces hitting f7. I don't see a checkmate. So here's the point. If black takes the queen, which he did not do in the game, then white recovers the queen by this fork. White's going to end up a pawn ahead and doing well. Now what actually happened in the game was black took the knight and then white took the bishop. But again, white's up a healthy pawn and short ended up winning the game. Let me go back a minute though and ask you, why was bishop e3 played? Yeah, you got it, because if white tried this right away with this forking idea, well, there's a problem on f2. Queen takes f2 is mate. Okay, so bishop to e3 was a preparatory move for that. So when Nigel Short drove the king over to f8, he was probably eyeing this plan for a while, maybe even earlier than here. And so you have to watch these knights. They're not actually permanently pinned all the time, especially on this king side here, pinning it to the queen like this. Sometimes it can go target something like the f7 square, or in this case, it was targeting an interesting fork. Okay, so watch out for that. So it's not a Légal's mate, but maybe Nigel Short had that idea in mind because he knew this Légal's mate idea and all of its variations and how you move that knight out of the way sometimes and take a pawn on e5. So chess is full of patterns, and the more patterns you know, the better you get. Okay, thanks for watching the video.